Hello friends. Today we will touch upon the topic of tragedies in the mountains, where every step seems like the last, and every breath becomes a question of life and death. When you think about these places, Everest immediately comes to mind, as if calling into the darkness, but it turns out that not so many people lose their lives on this summit. Look at Mount Annapurna and you will see what kind of nightmare lies within its depths. The percentage of climbers who perish on it is several times higher than on Everest itself. But 2023 became a real nightmare for Everest. There were a whole 18 people left on the summit, as if it were an ominous omen. Remember how in 2014, 17 climbers died on Everest, and you will begin to understand how terrifying it is. And over the past 50 years, on average, only 5 people die at the summit, but 2023 exceeded this statistic fourfold. What lies behind this dark shadow of death that consumes those who dare to embark on the path upwards? Today we will try to unravel this mystery and perhaps see that the true danger often lurks in the heart of man, rather than on the mountain peaks. So, in the first case we will talk about Dr. Peter Sword. He was an anesthesiologist from South Africa, and life seemed perfect to him. A successful career, a family, 2 children, all the dreams of his youth seemed to have come true. But even in this picture of the perfect world, there lurked an unrelenting dream of climbing mountain peaks. After many years, when family and professional obligations were fulfilled, Peter decides to return to his old passion, mountaineering. He trains, prepares, and in 2019, at the age of 59, he successfully conquers the highest peak in North America, Denali. But this feat only ignites his passion for mountaineering even more. Peter seeks help from the company Madison Mountain Ring, one of the most prestigious in organizing commercial expeditions. His goal is Everest, and he is provided with a quality acclimatization plan, especially important at these altitudes. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but there was a sense that something sinister lurked in the darkness, something that could not have been foreseen on any route map. In one of the photos taken on social media, we see Dr. Peter Sword standing on the Khumbu icefall, when nature, it seemed, favored his ascent. The date on the photo is April 28th, but dark hints began to slip through the cracks of confidence when on May 16th he posted his last photo. In the snapshot, taken also on the Khumbu Glacier, in the spirit of a brave sailor before a storm, he wrote, "Great day for climbing." And at first everything went smoothly. The climber and his brave team ascended to the 4th camp, where the air became thin, as if the breath of death was breathing down their necks. This camp, located in the very heart of the so-called death zone, was already a harbinger of darkness, where even the healthiest and strongest person began to unravel the mysterious laws of altitude. From there he embarked on the final stage of his strange journey, where time stretched like eternity and death grinned from every rocky cliff. And as soon as they entered this darkness, where the air turned into poison and life drowned in the abyssal black void, it began. First a dry cough like a hoarse voice from the abyss, then trembling as if death softly knocked on the door. This could only be the first harbinger of the impending horror altitude sickness, hiding within its embrace the most dreadful of deaths. It's also called high altitude cough, but this name is just a disguise in the face of the true horror that cunningly creeps up on anyone who dares to violate the laws of altitude. Under the icy cover, where oxygen was as scarce as hope, Peter continued to cough, his voice nothing but an echo of darkness piercing the silence of vast expanses. He felt each breath becoming heavier and heavier, as if the air itself was filling his lungs with sinister shadows. Beneath the icy spires of Khumbu, where winds shrieked in agreement with the merciless nature, his salvation from the mountain's curse began. Sherpas, with eyes that knew the secrets of this eternal darkness, relentlessly led him through the labyrinthine ice corridors, like guides of souls into the abyss of oblivion. Step by step, they overcame treacherous obstacles, where every whisper of the wind seemed to foretell doom, every shadow a menacing specter that could swallow them forever. And all the while Peter felt his own body growing colder, as if a dead hand lurked for him in the darkness. As they reached the 3rd camp at 7,300 meters, death lurked in the shadows, ready to strike. The Sherpas bravely teetered on the brink between life and death, refusing to let despair prevail. His descent was merely a flight from the inevitable, but even in the darkness of the Everest night, where every step was a Herculean effort, Peter's flesh and bones fought desperately for life. But fate was already written in the blood of this ominous mountain, and as he fell to his knees, his heart died beneath the icy sky. Thus ended the life of Dr. Peter soared at the top of the world, surrounded by darkness and death, consumed by the eerie darkness that spared no one, not even those who dared to defy its majesty. The lonely wind howled through the mountain peaks as if foretelling the tragedy that had already lurked in the dark ravines. Peter's wife, sitting by the window in their home, felt the wind penetrate the depths of her soul, heralding something ominous. Their two children, playing on the rug in the living room, were unaware that their father's fate had already been sealed on the endless heights of Everest. Peter was but a small link in the chain of tragic events that began many years ago when his dream of rising above the world penetrated the depths of his being. He was an alpinist not only on the mountains but also in his soul, which thirsted to experience all the hardships and dangers of this world. But now, as the shadow of death enveloped him, his family realized that they had lost not only a husband and father but also a part of their own hearts. Some might say that Peter was too old for such adventures, that his experience did not match the challenges of Everest. But in this tragedy there was something greater, something dark and mysterious that lay beyond their understanding. Were these the curses of the mountains standing in the way of his rescue, or simply fate playing its sinister game? The answers to these questions were lost in the whirlwind of wind, carrying only whispers of the dead and the damned. Another example of how Everest claimed another climber in 2023. Through the twilight haze, the light of truck headlights pierced as if heralding something ominous. The road was quiet and empty when fate abruptly turned Jason Kennison onto the most terrifying intersection in its array. Young and full of life, he was merely a puppet in the hands of fate, which maliciously grinned, intending to shatter his destiny in an instant. Thus began his sorrowful story, a story in which every step was a painful reminder of the past, of that awful moment that turned his life upside down. His path strewn with debris and shattered dreams, he was forced to traverse mountains of suffering and trials he never suspected. The spinal injury was just the beginning of his grueling journey. Doctors whose fate was determined by ominous predictions promised him endless darkness, foretelling that he would never again feel solid ground beneath his feet. But Jason refused to accept this cruel fate. His will stronger than bones, he resolved to emerge from this black hole that even the boldest dared not dream of. Thus began his saga of fighting for life, of how he, young and vulnerable, embarked on a path of trials where every step was threatened, where every breath was a battle. And though the road was long and arduous, he, whose name was tightly bound to hope, did not give up. The shadow of the past is always heavy and dark, but in Jason Kennison's case it turned into a carpet of shards that seemed to forever shield him from the light of hope. However, where others saw the end, he saw a new beginning, an opportunity for rebirth from the ashes of his past. Rehabilitation became his battle, where every moment was a test of strength and endurance. But he did not retreat, did not succumb to the horror of the dark predictions of the doctors. He, whose soul was infused with resilience, once again felt the strength in his legs, mighty and unyielding like the walls of a castle where he locked away his fears. This story of miraculous recovery turned out to be like a torch, lighting the way through the darkness like a call to a new life. Jason, whose name became a symbol of hope, decided to embrace the challenge of Everest, to show the world and himself that even in the darkest corners of the soul, the fire of hope still burns. His journey was not just a swift ascent to the summit, but also a voyage of self-discovery, of realizing his own strength and capabilities. He not only pursued his personal victory but also pursued charitable goals, drawing attention to those who faced similar trials. Doctors tried to dissuade him from this perilous endeavor, but for Jason their words became only an echo of the past, just an empty sound. He was prepared for this ascent, ready to battle with himself and with the mountain, which stood before him like a living guardian of trials. He conquered terrifying heights, his body acclimating to the thin air, and his soul to the darkness that enveloped the peaks. With each step towards the summit, he felt his being merge with the mountains, as if becoming part of their infinite silence. In the emptiness of the majestic peaks, he found his place, marveling at the beauty and austere power of the mountain ranges. On the 19th of May, as the sky opened its embrace, he ascended to the summit of the world. Videos and photographs captured his smile, his victory over himself and the world, but no one knew what terrifying trials awaited him on the descent. And how often in the world of mountains, precisely at the moment of victory, the treachery of nature reveals itself in full. The descent from the height was the beginning of a new trial, encounters with unknown threats and unpredictable dangers. The shadow of death enveloped every step, reminding of the fragility of human nature in the face of the power of nature. As they began to descend, the guides noticed something was amiss with Jason. His speech became unintelligible, his thoughts confused, and his behavior inexplicable. The shadowy figures distorted his perception, entangling his mind in an invisible web. Pain drowned in the vast expanses of the mountains, but it awaited its moment to draw attention once again. The symptoms of mountain sickness tore him from reality, gifting him a kaleidoscope of hallucinations. But the shadow of illness brought not only illusions but also real threats, penetrating to the very core of consciousness. 2 Sherpas accompanied Jason, but even their presence did not save him from the silent invasion of danger. Oxygen cylinders disappeared before their eyes, as if swallowed by the merciless high-altitude air. It was unclear whether this was a planning error or a preordained fate sealed in the vast expanses of Everest. One way or another, Jason found himself in a rather dire state when they reached a place known as the balcony. It's a place where the air is thin, as if a transparent sphere clouds the mind, and the heart beats in an uneasy rhythm, like the harbinger of storms hidden behind the clouds. At an altitude of 8,400 meters, where breathing becomes almost imperceptible, Jason began to lose touch with reality, as if entangled in the web of hidden forces that decide fates in remote corners of the world. The Sherpas, witnesses to his descent into the boundless ocean of unknown fears, decided not to risk it and leave him in this dangerous place to descend themselves and take measures capable of bringing him back to the living. Oxygen cylinders became the last hope in this cold world, where life hung by a thread, like a puppet in the hands of an unknown puppeteer. But as the Sherpas descended to the camp, the heavens began to flash with furious anger. The wind howled like a demon, trying to tear everything living from the mountain slope. The snow, like ash from a dying fire, began to melt on their skin, mixing with the blood of their hearts. Returning back to Jason meant putting their lives at risk, which melted in the whirl of white emptiness. Leaving Jason's body at an altitude of 8,400 meters, they left him as a warning to all climbers forging their path to the summit. His mother's words resonated in the silence of the mountains. Jason always went all in, no matter what. He just went and did it, and 9 times out of 10, he made it. And apparently this was the one time he didn't. And as you can see, these are just 2 cases out of 18 incidents that occurred in 2023. Darkness consumes those who boldly enter its domain, drawn by the magic of unconquered peaks. In my opinion, such mortality is directly linked to the increased number of ascents. Mountaineering, over its entire existence, has undergone significant transformation. In the 19th century, it was the pursuit of eccentric aristocrats who in feathered hats stormed the alpine summits. The 20th century was a time of a kind of sporting race, where climbers made first ascents of unclimbed peaks, giving them new names, and again there were no ordinary people involved. In one scale of the balance, ambition, thirst for adventure, and the other, the cold embrace of the mountains, hiding secrets and death within. But in the 21st century, trends seem to have changed. The so-called commercial mountaineering began to develop rapidly, like a black spot on a beautiful page. Professional and not so professional guides offer people who are not connected to the mountains to climb almost any peak in the world. Just pay money. I am not claiming that commercial mountaineering is bad. A huge number of people have successfully climbed and descended from Everest on such commercial tours, but because of this, people have formed the impression that Everest is no longer a deadly mountain, but rather a checkbox in the biography that anyone with enough means can check off. In their eyes, the mountain has ceased to be a mysterious world where decisions are made on the brink of life and death and has become a commodity available for a certain price. And, in my opinion, one of the main problems with Everest is that it's very popular, like that old house at the end of the street where everyone wants to go. Because of this popularity, there are always crowds on the mountain, as if a free show had been announced. Traffic jams of climbers and Sherpas form at the summit, literally carrying commercial clients on their backs, and not everyone can endure such queues to the end. It's like an anthill, where every ant strives to push forward to be the first to reach the desired goal. It's also obvious that such a high mortality rate on Everest last year is directly related to the number of permits issued by the Nepalese government for climbing this majestic peak. If you didn't know, you can't just come to Everest and climb to its summit. It's not a place where you can simply sneak in like into a theater without a ticket. You need permission from the Nepalese government, as if you're trying to penetrate a restricted area. And this permission costs a lot of money, as if you're paying for entry to the most expensive concert. Tens of thousands of dollars, as if you're agreeing to pay for a meeting with the devil himself. Plus, the number of permits is limited. Last year, Nepal issued a record number of permits, 479 for Everest ascents. That's a record. In the entire history of climbing, and considering that on average there are 1.5 porters per climber, that's 1,200 people. There's an incredible crowd on the mountain, like people at a fair, where everyone is trying to grab their piece of excitement and glory. I'm surprised they didn't all die in those queues, and it's not hard to guess that this greatly pleases the Nepalese authorities. The lion's share of the country's economy depends on tourism, like capital that cannot be missed. They issue insanely expensive climbing permits, like valuable tickets to the most thrilling attraction. A huge part of the population serves climbers, like an army of workers serving in an abandoned quarry. This includes cooks, porters, and guide escorts, who also charge substantial amounts like masters of their craft, not to mention the currency climbers and tourists spend in cities on hotels, taxis, street vendors, and so on. Therefore, with each passing year, the number of permits increases like an endless stream of travelers eager to penetrate the world of mountain peaks and personal achievements. And one could argue, what's wrong with mountains becoming more popular every year? With 1,200 people on the mountain, like columns of endless warriors spending several months there each season, an incredible amount of trash is generated. It's like a trail left by a mad caravan, carrying its invasion through the lands of uncharted peaks. Trash that is nearly impossible to bring down from such heights, like a stone thrown into an abyss. And only in recent years have tourists attempted to carry all their trash down, but not everyone does it, and not all the trash descends from Everest. It remains there like a curse hanging over the mountain sanctuary, and with each new expedition it accumulates new layers like the bark of an ancient tree, piling up and being forgotten until it becomes an immensely heavy burden on the shoulders of this mountain, suffering from excessive human ignorance. Of course, there are programs for cleaning up the mountains carried out, for example, by the Nepalese army, but in my opinion this is a drop in the ocean, and Everest is still a big dump. Like a living organism absorbing new tons of waste every day, it suffers heavily under the weight of human carelessness. And besides, during the garbage cleanup expedition this year, one Sherpa died. Death on the summit, like a black spot on the dense veil of clouds, reminds us that even the noblest efforts can end in tragedy. And in the grand scheme of things, the statistics are quite logical. The more ascents, the higher the percentage of those who don't return. How can a person, driven by their thirst to conquer heights, not realize that every step upward is a journey into the unknown, where one mistake can be fatal, where every minute at the summit is like a thin thread over the abyss, ready to snap at any moment? In my opinion, in 50% of cases, commercial companies are to blame, as they attract individuals with minimal mountain experience and readiness for such ascents. They promise their clients service and successful ascents, and in return receive trust and large sums of money. And of course, under normal conditions they provide the service, but when it comes to serious situations, unprepared and somewhat naive individuals are treated as professional climbers who weigh all the risks and take responsibility for themselves. As a result, we increasingly see situations where Sherpas descend while commercial climbers are left to die in the mountains. They become pawns in a game where the price is not only money but also human life. Are they doing the right thing? Yes and no, they are definitely following the principle of minimizing casualties, trying to save the victim without jeopardizing the lives of several other rescuers. Sometimes it's necessary to leave a person in the mountains, but who allows them to embark on the ascent in such a condition? Who ignores the symptoms of altitude sickness? And in my opinion, often it turns out that commercial climbers rely on their guides, believing in their professionalism, and in critical situations they are simply told every man for himself. All your thoughts and reflections on this story will be appreciated in the comments under this video. Don't forget to like, share this video with friends, and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on new exciting stories. Your support is very important to us, and we hope to continue to amaze you with fascinating narratives.